Good morning to you. I'm Joe Ryan. I'm going to make a presentation to you on this video that is a supplement to the Joe Ryan Battle Walks Antietam and Lee's Lost Order. Now, this video is not for all of you. It's only for those few of you that are interested in understanding the evidentiary underpinnings of the theory of the Lost Order that I presented on the Battle Walk videotape. This is of some length. It's a presentation that would take several days to make in court if we were litigating this issue in front of a jury. I'm going to present to you all of the existing original documents that are relevant to understanding how General Lee manipulated the circumstances to get this document into McClellan's hands. He had to deal with both his own personal staff, which involved 4 young aides-de-camp, Charles Marshall, Walter Taylor, A.L. Long, and Charles Venable, as well as several individuals that were present in his headquarters but were operating on a distinct chain of command outside his control, and that would be Robert Chilton, who is functioning as the Assistant Adjutant General on behalf of Samuel Cooper, the Adjutant General of the Confederate Armies, and his associate, A.P. Mason. There are 4 or 5 documents that are necessary to present in order for you to have an understanding of how General Lee pulled this situation off. So good luck to you. To those few who are interested, I may have to do this in 2 parts in order to get it uploaded on YouTube, but we'll see how it goes. As those of you who are familiar with this situation, you know that the Lost Order, in fact, is designated as Special Order 191. The document that you're looking at on the board is, in fact, the original and first rendition of Special Order 191. Special Order 191. Now, this document is written in the hand of a gentleman named A.P. Mason. A.P. Mason was an associate of R.H. Chilton, who in September of 1862 was functioning as the Assistant Adjutant General attached to General Lee's headquarters staff. Richard Chilton did not work for or take orders from General Lee. Chilton's superior officer was General Samuel Cooper, the Adjutant General of the Confederate Armies. Cooper's office was in Richmond, and Cooper's function as Adjutant General was to supervise the collection of records that were created in the headquarters of the several armies of the Confederate States, General Lee's included. And to facilitate the collection of these documents under the Confederate regulations, General Cooper would assign an individual to the staff to function as Assistant Adjutant General, and that individual would be responsible for making sure that any orders involving movements of personnel within the Army were preserved in record keeping, and copies were sent contemporaneous with the event. And so on September 9, 1862, the story of the lost order begins when General Lee caused the order you see in front of you to be written. How he did this is not known. It's doubtful that he would have personally gone to A.P. Mason and dictated directly to him the contents of Special Order 191. Presumably, one of his staff officers might well have done that. Walter Taylor himself was the key individual in General Lee's personal staff who was actually responsible for being aware of the creation of orders, the promulgation of the orders, the dissemination of the order, and so forth. It's obvious that General Lee wanted Walter Taylor to be gone from the headquarters so that Walter Taylor would not be in a position to be questioning the circumstances under which the lost order was going to be created. And to do that, General Lee ordered that Walter Taylor leave the Army, that he proceed to Warrenton, Virginia, and that he cause the line of communication between Culpeper and Frederick to be broken up, and that all supplies, wagons, and men that are moving along that line of communication be transferred from Culpeper to Frederick to Culpeper to Winchester, because General Lee was shifting his line of communication from Culpeper to Winchester. And that's what this order says. The first paragraph is really a throwaway paragraph. It talks about how the Army is supposed to be treating the civilians in the area. The second paragraph orders that Walter Taylor leave the Army, conduct the operation I described, and then return. Walter Taylor returned to the Army at Sharpsburg the day before the battle occurred. Now, there are features of this document that you want to pay attention to. You'll notice that on the second page, which is at the bottom, in the lower right-hand corner, there's a signature. That's the signature of Robert Chilton. That's his authentic signature. And over here, you'll see that this document is a copy that was prepared for General Cooper, the Adjutant General in Richmond. So what we know about this document is that it was written by A.P. Mason, and that it was signed by Chilton, and that it was sent by messenger. It was sent to Richmond. Now, the reason we have it today in its original form is that in 1865, as Petersburg fell, General Cooper caused all of the records that he had maintained for 4 years to be placed in wagons. And these wagons then trundled their way as a wagon train to Goldsboro, North Carolina, where the train was captured by Sherman, who was coming up through the Carolinas to join with Grant. The wagon train contents were taken to Washington and became the property of the War Department. They remained unavailable to the public for many years. In the 1880s, the War Department began organizing the records from the wagon train and began publishing the reports and communications and correspondence in a series of volumes called the Official Record of the Rebellion. Sometime thereafter, when the National Archives was formed as an institution, the War Department transferred these documents into the custody of the National Archives, and you can examine this document in its original form today by going to the National Archives in Washington. Now that's a far cry from the Lost Order that we're going to look at later. And we're going to have to ask the questions, well, how did the Lost Order become Special Order 191? Now you're looking at the front of the document that is held by the Library of Congress and which is represented to be the actual document that was handed to McClellan on September the 13th at Frederick. Now, looking at it, the first thing we can see is that whoever wrote it out was using pencil, that it appears that in writing the date, he wrote the number 1, realized he was making a mistake, and without eraser, he squiggled a line, a jagged line down the length of the 1, and he wrote next to it 9, September 9. Starts with paragraph 3. Now from the format, you can see, if you go down the page, that it looks pretty rough. It's in pencil. It's not that neat handwriting of either A.P. Mason, which is in ink, or Marshall, which is in ink. This is in pencil. Some words and numbers are heavily emphasized, and where he's pressed down the pencil very hard. Others are light. He's crossed a couple things out. Whoever wrote this, the Potomac, he's fiddled with Potomac, General Longstreet, Ferry. This is down to paragraph 5. Here we start with paragraph 6. General Walker with his division. Now let's go over to the second side. Now this is the back side. You can see from the red lines in the lower half of the document that this thing was folded in half, and then it was folded like a letter. And it fit into a small envelope, 3 inches by 5 inch envelope. Now let's focus on Walker's paragraph 6 and the syntax. As far as practical, cooperate with General McLaws and General Jackson. That's it. That's not Mitchell. That's not Charles Marshall's syntax. General McLaws and General Jackson in intercepting. The verb has been changed from intercept to intercepting, and the preposition, the article in has been inserted. So we went from retreat to we went from intercept to intercepting, and we've added the preposition the retreat of the enemy. This is different. This is not the same. Whoever wrote this out was not using as a template Marshall's copy. Now this is the order of the 9th that General Lee referred to in his letter to Davis, which was dated the 12th, written at Hagerstown. Now this, you will notice in the upper left-hand corner, it refers to Special Order 190. Special Order 190. And it's dated September the 9th. And at the bottom, we have again the signature of R.H. Chilton. Assistant Adjutant General. Now, the Confederate regulations require, as I said, that all orders, copies of all orders be sent to Richmond, specifically to the Adjutant General's office. We saw that the original Special Order 191, which was 2 paragraphs and which really dealt with Walter Taylor being detached from the Army, was in fact sent to General Cooper, and it was in fact signed by Chilton. The difference here is that while this order is dated the 9th and signed by Chilton, it is sent by General Lee himself as an enclosure with his letter dated September the 12th to President Davis. Now the letter and this copy of the order, this enclosure, both this order and the letter in which it was enclosed did in fact reach President Davis. President Davis retained possession of both the letter and the enclosure. When Petersburg fell, President Davis fled Richmond with an entourage, carried with him a trunk full of his personal correspondence. When he reached Georgia, he was forced to abandon the trunk as he was being captured by Union cavalry. The trunk remained in Georgia in a farmhouse for some time. Many years passed. The contents of the trunk surfaced over time. A financier from New York in the early 1930s purchased both the letter and the enclosure, along with other letters written by Lee to Davis during the same campaign, and he donated them to the Virginia State Library, where the originals can be seen today. So from the time the letters was sent by messenger from Hagerstown, it was not seen by the public until almost 70 years later. The first observation that I'll make for you is that this is a order with starts with paragraph number 3, and it proceeds down to paragraph 10. So it's 7 paragraphs. Paragraph 6 deals with General Walker's division. General Walker's division had come up after the Battle of Second Manassas from Richmond. It was an independent division. It was not attached to anyone. When it crossed the Potomac, Lee ordered it to remain at the mouth of the Monocacy. On September the 9th, it marched into Frederick, and it was immediately ordered by General Lee to return to the Monocacy and to destroy the aqueduct bridge that carried the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal across the Monocacy. And it was while Walker's division was still at the Potomac on September the 10th that a messenger arrived at his camp bringing to him what Walker says was Order 191, and paragraph 6 deals with Walker's role in this business about capturing Harper's Ferry, and that's paragraph 6. Now, the syntax of paragraph 6 is what we want to concentrate on, because it's going to be important. And paragraph 6 is right here, and the end of the paragraph is this last word, enemy. So when I read this, I'm going to be focusing on language in this lower sentence, the syntax of how Marshall wrote out this sentence. Now you remember that in the letter that Marshall wrote for Lee to Davis, the part that I read, he uses the phraseology Generals McLaw and Jackson. And here, and this is also in Marshall's handwriting, no doubt about it, he uses the syntax Generals McLaw and Jackson. So he's being consistent in his own use of language. Now let's read the whole sentence that we're interested in here, that we'll focus on in later examples of this order. General Walker, with his division, after accomplishing the object in which he is now engaged, will cross the Potomac at Cheek's Ford, ascend the right bank to Lovettsville, take possession of Loudon Heights if practical, and by Friday morning, Keys Ford on his left and the road between the end of the mountain and the Potomac on his right, he will, as far as practical, cooperate with Generals McLaws and Jackson and intercept retreat of the enemy. As far as practical, cooperate with Generals McLaw and Jackson and intercept retreat of the enemy. Now that's how Marshall wrote it out. And this is our clue. This is our evidence. It shows us that there's two separate tracks at work here. One track involved the two-paragraph Special Order 191, the order labeled 190 with 7 paragraphs written by Marshall, and the incorporation of both of those documents into Chilton's letter book. Both of those documents having been signed off by Chilton, and both of them in one way or another reaching Richmond. Now we seem to be in the hands of a different individual. This seems to be a draft. It seems to be a roughly written document. And as you get to the bottom of it, you see that it's been designated for General D.H. Hill, commanding division. And it says by command of Robert E. Lee, and there's a name, R.H. Chilton, A.A. General. Now we know that's not Chilton's actual signature, because we've seen two versions, we've seen two documents that contain his undisputed signature, and there's no comparison whatsoever. Whoever wrote out the document itself simply wrote in Chilton's name. And of course, the only place Chilton's name actually appears on the 7-paragraph version of this thing is in Marshall's copy that went to Davis. Now, a word has to be said about handwriting. Well, a word has to be said first about the chain of custody of the actual document that was handed up through the chain of command from Barton Mitchell, who found it in the field, a private in the 27th Indiana Regiment, to his sergeant, who took it with him to his colonel, and then to the division, and then up to McClellan's headquarters. And then the many years that have passed, 150 years that have passed since McClellan received it at his headquarters on September the 13th, 1862. The problem is, how are we going to establish that this is in fact the same document? And that somewhere along that long span of time, the original document in McClellan's hands had been stolen, had been destroyed, had been sold to a private collector. We don't know. And this is merely a substitute, like a painting in a museum. We don't know. We just will never be able to tell. The length of time is too long. The points in time in which the document was preserved in different ways is too vast. that the fact that we've eliminated as the potential writer all of General Lee's staff is important. Only if we assume, however, that this in fact is the same document McClellan received. If it is the same document McClellan received and none of General Lee's staff officers wrote it, then the finger has to point toward General Lee.